As we embark on the Great Canadian Farm Tour, it is important to acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of Indigenous peoples. Agriculture in the Classroom Canada recognizes and honors the enduring presence of the diverse Indigenous communities across Canada, including the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. We acknowledge the deep connection that Indigenous peoples have to the land, waters, resources, and all of agriculture. We express our gratitude for their stewardship and custodianship of these lands for generations. Agriculture in the Classroom Canada recognizes that acknowledging the traditional territories we reside and work on is only a small step towards reconciliation. We ask that we all continue to learn more about the Indigenous peoples in these regions, to consider the history and ongoing colonialism on this land, and to reflect on how each of us can contribute to reconciliation. Hello, bonjour. Welcome everyone to our next stop on Season 3 of the Great Canadian Farm Tour. We are so excited to have everyone join us today from across Canada. My name is Mercedes Unwin from Agriculture in the Classroom Canada, and I will be your MC for today. Before we get started, we just want to provide a few reminders. For those who want to follow along in French, please use the Interprofile link provided in the chat to access the interpreting and closed captioning services provided for this event. We ask that everyone is mindful this is an educational event, so inappropriate conduct happening in the chat, such as spamming and improper comments, will not be tolerated. Throughout the tour, we will welcome you to post your questions in the chat to get them answered. We'll answer as many questions as possible. The mystery word for your student activity books will appear at the end of this episode, so please stick around to see it. Finally, we would love to know where everyone is joining us from today. Please comment in the chat your school and location. Now, we would like to welcome our next tour host of the Great Canadian Farm Tour, Alycia, who is the founding member of QuantoTech located in British Columbia.
Hello, everyone. It's Alycia here from QuantoTech, and we're a vertical farming company out in BC. So I see people are joining in from all over the place. I see Jennifer from Saskatchewan. We actually have another farm in Saskatchewan in Weyburn.
Oh, thank you for joining us today, Alycia. So before we get started, just tell us a little bit more about yourself.
So I started QuantoTech about 10 years ago when I was going to university, actually in Alberta, in Lethbridge. So it started off, I had my plants out on my patio, and for anyone that's visiting from Alberta here today, they know that it gets a little cold in the wintertime, and I grew pretty attached to my plants. So I didn't want to see them die. So I did a lot of research and looking into LED lighting, and learned more about how I can keep my plants alive inside. And from there, that's where QuantoTech basically came from.
Oh, wonderful. It's so amazing how kind of a small little dream grows into something so big. So thank you for sharing that. And now I'm going to hand over the controls to you to get us started on this amazing tour on vertical farming. So
all right.
here I'll hand it over to you, and then I'll just take a little leave and I'll come back a little bit later.
Perfect. Well, I'm just going to switch my camera around to the back camera here so you can see where we are right now. So this would be my farm gate. So the farm gate is where we do our produce sales at the end of the day. So we sell to grocery stores and restaurants and all sorts of places, but we also sell direct to customers. So at the end of the day, when all the orders go out, if there's anything remaining, we can sell it at our farm gate there. So then we're going to come in here into the farm. So the first thing I do when I get to the farm is we got to wash our hands. That's one of the most important things to do. So I've already done it. I've got my gloves on here. But what we want to do is make sure our hands are clean because we're going to be handling food and things that people eat and pathogens and the little bugs that can make you sick, like when you get a cold or a flu. That can be transferred from your hands if they're not properly clean to the plants and then into the grocery stores where other people can catch it. So the first thing we do is make sure that we're not feeling sick before we ever enter the farm, especially since this is an enclosed space. So as you can tell, we're in a room here. We're in a room inside of a warehouse. There's no windows. You can't see the sun above. It's all completely enclosed. It's really easy for pathogens to build up in ways that you might not expect. So the little bugs can get places a little easier when there's no wind really blowing around or anything like that. So this might look very high tech, but it's very easy to use. So what's happened here is we've actually designed everything you see here ourselves. So not only do we farm, but we also make our own equipment. So everything from the LED lighting, which you can see up here, to the hydroponics and everything in between. So I see there's a question there about why there's different colors. So the plants are kind of like the opposite of us when it comes to spectrum, which is the colors that you see in the visible light spectrum. So we see white and greens really, really well, whereas the plants, they see reds and blues. So if you're imagining the spectrum like a wave, the reds and the blues, reds are on one side and the greens are in the middle. So we see really well in the middle, but the plants see really well on the two ends. So they are basically ignoring the middle white colors. So we want to save electricity by only giving them what they can see, because they'll just bounce it back off because they're green. So they reflect all that green light, whereas they can absorb and consume all the red and blue lights, which helps give them their energy. So you can see we've designed those lights to have the spectrum laid out in a certain way so that we get a really even distribution over the full plant canopy here. And then to control that, we have our controller system, which is just a simple touch screen. So you can see these guys are ready to harvest on this level. They're nice and big, they're nice and green. But some of the other guys are further along and less farther along. So we have a range of plants. So over here we can see on the propagation level, that's propagating is just when we have little baby plants just before they sprout out. So you can see they're just seeds there. These were just planted yesterday, so they haven't sprouted yet. Whereas these ones have just sprouted, so they're just starting their journey into becoming a full-size plant. So we keep them in this level while they're getting strong enough to transplant for 2 to 3 weeks. And then they get moved over to the next level where they spend the rest of their life for another 2 weeks or so. When they're really little like this, they don't take up much space. So you can keep them really close together and it's totally okay. They won't get in each other's way. However, once you start to grow them a little bigger, you really have to spread them out. So you see here, those plants are much more spread out, so they have a lot of room to grow. And we also have a couple different varieties here. So we have a basil plant in between a butterhead lettuce plant. And they get along pretty well, so we're able to grow them together. So we have a lot of plants in this room. So if you're looking at this one level that I'm looking at here, there is 12 plants on this one level. And then if we zoom out a little bit, there's 32 of those shelves in here. So I'll have to let you guys do the math. 32 times 12. That's how many are in here right now. But what happens is we actually end up harvesting them twice a month. So their life cycle is about 35 days. So we actually can fit twice that amount in a single month. So you can see we have more varieties of plants too. So up here we have a romaine lettuce. So romaine is one of those ones that are pretty common in the grocery store in your salads, but we also have some chard as well. So one of the fun things about growing indoors is you can give the plants the best day of their life. Let's say it's July, a nice summer, warm, sunny day, every day. So they don't have to deal with the clouding. We can give them exactly what they need every day. We don't have any clouds to deal with. The temperature is consistent. It keeps them very happy, and we're able to get them to grow nice and big like this. Now, it does take some electricity to do this, since we don't have the sun just giving them all the light they need for us. So that's another reason why it's important to have those colors. So the colors allow us to not waste energy by giving them those white and green kind of spectrums that they don't need. So this system is what we call an ebb and flow system. So it's a type of hydroponics where the water comes up from the nutrient tank and it flows up into the tray, and it goes and fills the tray, and then it flows back down. So if you remember, I mentioned about pathogens, the little bugs that make you sick. Well, you see in there, the blue is the UV lighting. So when we have an ebb and flow system, we can have the nutrients come up from the tank, flow up into the UV to kill all those bugs, and then up into the tray to feed the plants. And then once the plants have sucked up enough of their water and nutrients, their food, it comes back down and it goes back to kill any bugs that might be living in the roots. So you can see in there we have the root balls where all the roots are coming through, where they keep it all nice and wet and keep the plants happy. So we've designed our own nutrient mix. So I have another question here about how much electricity we use on the farm. So I would say for electricity, it's our third biggest cost. For a space like this, it's about $50 per one of these grow banks, we call them. So per month, that's around what we spend. However, of course, power is a little different all over where everyone's located today. So some of our friends out in Ontario right now have a different type of way of selling electricity, where when people aren't using it too much, the cost is lower. So one of the other benefits of growing indoors is since the plants don't know what time of day it is, we can grow the plants and have their daytime period when it is a little less expensive. But for the nutrients, it gives them their food, and what we've done here also, because we're trying to really not only save electricity, but save water. So when we fill up our tanks for the nutrients, we fill them to the top. And from there, the plants slowly drink it down to the bottom. So we're not consistently giving some, we're only giving them what they need. And then at the end of the cycle, there's not that much left that we have to get rid of. So in this farm, we're growing 5 different varieties of plants, but we really can grow a whole lot more. One of the reasons we focus on these leafy greens and herbs is because they have a really fast growth cycle. So how I mentioned that electricity can be a bit expensive in some places, if you grow a plant that you can grow quickly and a lot of, then that helps offset the costs associated with farming indoors. So when I mentioned that we made our own system here, this is what houses all the grow recipes, we call them. And a grow recipe is the spectrum, so the colors of the light, how bright they are over time, and how long, how many hours in a day they're turned on. Because plants, just like us, they also need to sleep. So they like to sleep in the dark as well. So when we put on our grow recipes, we basically just let this run, and it speaks to all the lights. It tells them at the beginning of the growth cycle, when the plants are just little, they don't need as much light. They're too small to really take advantage and consume all that light. So when we're at the beginning of the growth cycle, we will have a different intensity or brightness of the light than we would at the end of the growth cycle when they're really big and they can eat a whole lot of light. I would say for all the plants here, someone was asking how long, which plant takes the longest to grow. In our system, I would probably say it'd be the Swiss chard here. However, there's also other crops that we can grow that take way more time. So we do experiment with strawberries. We don't have any in this research facility, but those would be taking several months to grow. So you got to make sure that the cost of the electricity makes sense for where you're growing crops such as strawberries. We never grow anything really like leafy or rooting vegetables because those take up way more space vertically.
Hi, Alycia. We're going to go into our brain break soon, but before we go, we're going to do a couple questions back to back. Then we'll take a brain break for everyone, which will be about a minute long, and then Alycia will be back just right after that. So let's get a question up on the board for you. So question is, Sarah's wondering, what is your favorite plant that you grow?
I think my favorite plant is the butterhead lettuce because it's very pretty. It has a nice rose-shaped pattern here, and it tastes really good too.
Okay, I love that. So it's so amazing how many different kinds of lettuces there are out there.
Yeah.
And then the next question from Abby, do you grow any flowers? Oh, specifically, this is being asked from Sylvie. Sorry, I'm correcting myself.
No, we don't grow any flowers, not at this time, but we are considering it because there are some edible flowers that would be nice to include in the salads that you can make from our farm.
And then our last question before the brain break is William asks, what happens if the power goes out?
Yeah, it's not great when the power goes out, that's for sure. All the lights end up turning off and the pumps will turn off. So it's important to have some backup power. We're luckily in a pretty stable area, but yeah, the plants, that's part of the risk. The plants won't be getting light. So if the power goes out, they can handle not getting light for maybe 8 hours or a whole day even. But they'll start to grow a little weird. They'll start looking for the light that they're missing. So they'll start to get really long. When it comes to the water, that's probably the highest risk part because the roots can only hold so much water. So they can't last a whole day without water. However, since they're not getting the light, they're not as thirsty as well. So it's not good, but it's good to have backup plans.
That's so interesting that you said that because I was growing a succulent and it was getting taller. And here I was thinking I was giving it the light it needed, but it was just being desperate for light because it was looking for it. So here I thought I was being a great gardener, but it turned out, in fact, I was not. So that's a great thing that you just shared. And now we'll be back in about 1 minute. So please be patient with us and enjoy the brain break. And we're back, and then I'll be handing the controls back to Alycia.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. So we were talking a little bit about the spectrum or the color of the light and the lack of light and how that affects what we call it the morphology or how the plant looks. So that was a really good question before, because when you take away the light, you can change the morphology or how the plant looks because it's reaching, it's stretching, it's searching for the light. That's how you see when trees grow really tall, they're stretching out and searching and growing big and strong, but they're also looking for the light from the sun. And one of the things that is so nice about the butterhead, my favorite, is that we're able to give it a special color recipe so that it forms like this. So it opens up. So sometimes it's really great to give the plants absolutely everything they need every day. But if you do that, they might not try so hard to get some of the light that they want, which means that they might close up and look a little bit more like a cabbage or something like that. And that's because they're getting so much light, they don't have to spread out their leaves and absorb more of that light. So by changing the spectrum or how bright it is and what the colors are, you can change that shape. So if we give them a little less light at a certain period when they're younger, then they'll open up nicely because they're looking for the light. And this also affects how maybe we want a tall plant to grow, like this basil here. So if we give it a bunch of blue, it'll grow shorter. It'll have a shorter stature. It'll have a shorter morphology. But if you give it lots of red, it'll grow really tall. So the different colors have different effects on the plants as well. And not only that, they can have different effects on the flavor. So for the basil, the blue really, really has a big effect on the flavor, and it could have effects on the nutrients as well. So there's all sorts of really cool things you can do when you're growing indoors that you couldn't do if you were out in the sun, because you can't tell the sun what color to be and when to be it. So this allows us to play around with the plants a bit. So I see a question from Erica. So Audrey asked how long the plants stay in the trays. So they stay in the bottom trays for 2 to 3 weeks, and in the top trays for another 2 weeks, and then we harvest them. And what we do is we harvest them living. So they're still alive when we harvest them. We don't cut them off. We keep this root ball attached, which means that they can keep alive. So when we sell them to grocery stores or to a restaurant, when they keep them in the fridge or anything like that, since they're still alive, they still have the high nutrient, the stuff that's good for you content than if we had clipped them, because leafy greens tend to deteriorate or start to die pretty quickly. So by keeping them alive, you can keep that nutrient value very high and allow them to last a lot longer, as long as you're taking good care of them. So let's say you bought one of this little baby basil from me, and you weren't ready to use it all. You could actually just pick off some of the leaves and keep, as long as you kept that root ball nice and wet, then the plant would keep on staying alive and healthy. It won't grow without the light, but it'll stay alive and fresh. So one of the other benefits of growing inside is that we can monitor what's happening as well. So we can keep track of what's going on with the lights, how hot they are, with the water levels. We can make sure things don't dip down past a certain point, or maybe if the air conditioning turned off, we would want to make sure that we're able to tell that that's happened and get in there and make sure we can fix things. So that's one of the benefits of growing inside and not having to worry about all your fancy electronics, having to deal with the outside. I got another question from Laura here about special water. So we do use city water in our operation. So we're attached to the City of Vancouver's water. Lots of other farms, they might have water from wells or from nearby lakes or something like that. But we use city water. But we don't just put the city water in there and hope the plants get everything they need. We have to mix our nutrients in there as well. So that's what's in the tanks. It's a combination of that water, and then it's some nutrients that the plants need to grow, like nitrogen and some other stuff. But yeah, we let it sit for a bit too, so that anything that's in there can kind of evaporate. So um, sometimes there's additives or things added to the city water, and the plants don't really like that. So when you let it sit for a bit, it all comes out. So there's all sorts of fun things that we're monitoring because we have to keep an eye on every single one of these. So right now in this, I mentioned that we have 32 shelves in here, but this is just our small scale farm. So what's happening is upstairs in this room, I won't have time to show you today, we're building out 100 more lights. So if this is 32, we're gonna have 3 times as much basically in our upstairs room. And then after that, we're growing even further and we'll have around 600 lights. So if you can imagine, these ones just have 2 of these banks here. This will go out way further and we'll have way more plants in there. I have a question from Shauna about how much water we use. We don't use very much water, so when we fill up the tank there, that's 100 liters. It's about 100 liters for, let's call it 24 plants. And then they drink all of that. And since we're not having any loss to evaporation from the sun, it's all really contained in there. We're able to use up every last bit. And it goes inside the plants and they breathe out some, but they use a lot of it to make their mass. So one of the things about having so many plants in one space, the plants, as part of their process, they breathe out a lot of oxygen. So they're once again a little opposite to us, like how I mentioned with the spectrum or the colors of the lights they like. They're kind of the opposite of what we are. So instead of breathing out carbon dioxide like we do, they breathe out oxygen. And oxygen we breathe in, and carbon dioxide they breathe in. So by standing in here and talking to the plants and talking to you guys, I'm breathing out carbon dioxide that the plants like to use to grow. And since we're in a small room here, just me spending time in here with the plants, talking to them or singing, some people do, that gives them what they need, that extra carbon dioxide to help with their growth. However, when I was talking about having 100 of these shelves in one room, now there's a lot of plants and there's just me. So my breathing out carbon dioxide isn't enough to outdo all the oxygen the plants are creating. So then we have to add more of it. So one thing that's interesting is that we're going to be adding mushrooms, and those are more like us that breathe out that carbon dioxide. So I've got another question here. Bryson asks, why do you choose to plant inside instead of outside? So there's a lot more risk when you're growing outside. You have those rainy days, you have cloudy days. It could get cold, it can get too hot. There's so many things you can't control. That's just part of the environment. Whereas when we're in here, I can control all the light that they get when they get it. I can control the temperature. We're sitting here at 20.5 degrees. They love 21 degrees. And we're at 59% humidity. So how much moisture is in the air. We can keep it right where they want it. And I can make sure we control all the cooling that comes in and all the humidity that gets taken out. Whereas if we were outside, I would just have to let the environment control that. There are some things you can do, you can shade them or some things like that, but you have much less control, and that's why it takes longer for the crops to grow. So the plants will take a longer time to grow, maybe 2 or 3 times as long outside than they would inside, because we're giving them absolutely everything they need. Oh, I just can't hear you there.
Oh, so hi, Alycia. We're coming really close to the end of the tour. So I think what we'll do is a couple more questions, and then I'll give you kind of final comments before we close everything out and share the mystery word for today. So let's get our last couple of questions up. So we have a question. So from Miss Torson's grade 3 to 4 class, Eric would like to know if you check on your plants every day, or are you able to take a break or a vacation?
Yes, I could take lots of breaks because this system is really, it runs by itself. So I can be from home, I can log into my computer and I can take a quick peek and make sure the plants are okay. I can be on vacation in Hawaii or something and I can take a little look and make sure the plants are okay. But luckily the system, it controls itself. It's telling the lights what to do. It's telling the pumps what to do, and we don't have to be in here all the time. But it's nice to be in here with the plants, so I like to come check on them anyway.
Wonderful. Then our next question from Bev. Have you figured out how much space you're saving using this method versus if you grew it traditionally in the ground?
Yeah, so we're basically saving around 10 times the space, but we're also saving around 10 times the water because when you're watering in the soil, you lose a lot of that just to the soil. It's absorbing it, it's sucking it in as much as the plants are. So by going vertically like this, by going up, we save 10 times of that space, but we also save 10 times of that water.
Which is pretty fantastic how amazing there's such great innovations like you're doing out there. Alycia, are there any final words you'd like to share with everyone?
Yeah, I would just say that vertical farming is just one type of farming. All types of farming are really important. We're not trying to replace other types of farming. We can't grow everything in here. I mentioned strawberries, but imagine if we were trying to grow corn inside here. All the spacing would have to be a whole lot more, and I don't know if it would make much sense. We'd have to go up pretty high. So it's really important to kind of work together so that outside farmers can focus on crops that do really well outside, and inside farmers like me can focus really well on crops that thrive inside. So we can all work together to make sure that everyone has access to food um, all the time.
And I think that's very true for everyone to kind of hear and know is that there's kind of a space for everyone in when it comes to working with food in the food supply chain or working in agriculture, and that you can find a space when it comes to either working outside with plants or working inside with plants. It's kind of amazing the diversity and how inclusive it can be in terms of interests and backgrounds. And so, anything else that you'd like to say to everyone just before we head into our final words?
No, I just want to thank everyone for joining us. And as mentioned, you can participate in where your food comes from all sorts of different ways. You can do indoor farming, you can do outdoor farming, you can volunteer, you can you can help create food, you can make sandwiches, you can there's so many different ways to participate. You can donate, there's everything. So it's really nice to be a part of the food system because it's something we all rely on. We all have to eat every day, so it's really good to participate.
Yeah, and that's so true. So, I hope everyone learned something today. I know I did. And before we close off this episode, and thank you for waiting patiently, I'm excited to share the mystery word for today is taught or découvrir la. That's our mystery word, our mystery mot. Thank you again for joining us on this episode of the Great Canadian Farm Tour. And our next stop will be tomorrow, actually, or April 18th at 12 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time at a floral greenhouse in Nova Scotia. So we got to see vertical farming today, and now we're going to go to a floral greenhouse tomorrow. And thank you again, everyone, and goodbye for now.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.